As I studied like the last 70, 80 years of computing, every time there is a new platform change, there are new APIs.
How did usage of AI change?
Everyone is either a builder or a seller for the most part. I don't think anyone in their right mind decides to serve developers. When developers choose you, you decide to serve them. New types of developers are there. The more APIs they consume, which means more demand for APIs, which means more Postman usage as well as more Postman customers. There's definite improvement in productivity, but it's not correlated with costs. Some of our best engineers do use a lot of AI, but they don't spend that much. While coding itself is pretty solvable, like hardness problems come from when things are being returned over the wire as an API call. I did not really know what is behind the API that is making the application break. So I needed a very simple tool to test it, which is how Postman came around. Over the last 15 months, we actually treat agents as a new class of API consumers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Startup Project. My guest today is Abhinav Asthana. He's the co-founder and CEO of Postman. Postman is an API platform that powers more than 14 million developers worldwide. We'll talk about Abhinav's entrepreneur journey, which is not at all standard. Started from his own side projects and evolved into founding Postman. We'll talk about how Postman became Ramen profitable, transition of Postman from single player tool to an enterprise tool, and his deep held philosophies on design, developer focus, etc. So if you're a founder, developer, or who generally loves a great origin story of a tech company, I think this is a good one. With that, Abhinav, welcome to the show.
I'm very excited to be here, Natras. Thanks for having me.
This is the first time I heard about Postman. I didn't realize firstly it was an Indian company. This was back in 2000, I want to say late 2015 or early 2016. I was working at this company called Epic Systems, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin. And either my colleague or if I found through SEO that, okay, there's this tool where I can test APIs. Before that, I was using, I forgot a tool which is used for network tracing to see like what are your API outputs, and which is very not so easy on the eye tool, but I think developers tend to use. And then I found Postman, and I never realized that Postman actually was at that point an Indian company. Postman for me sort of later sort of became that, okay, this poster child for the story of like, hey, you can build a worldwide SaaS company that is based out of India by Indian founders. So Postman sort of reflected for me that for a long while before like some of the other companies came out. So I want to start the conversation with like pre-Postman era of Abhinav. What were you doing before Postman? Talk a little bit about what were you building before Postman?
Yeah, well, thanks for being a user, hopefully a customer. I know, many of the companies you might have worked out or worked at or projects you might have worked on, we would have customers too. Uh, we, I think I would go back to that time, I think around the 2015, 2014 kind of era. Um, what I was doing before was actually my previous startup. So Postman is my second startup. And what I was doing at that time was, I would say, like a lot of programmers were doing back then, which was building products for the mobile/cloud era. So I've been a developer for most of my life, still code and still build things. And I think through I got my first computer, programming like in the logo language and then basic, and then very quickly I picked on to kind of Microsoft stack in my school days. And I kind of caught the internet bug uh, well I was in India, and there was not a lot of like people are using like kind of bits and pieces of the internet, but it's still like very alien technology. I think the computer was there, but I graduated soon to building like web applications, and made a hobby out of it for which I was actually getting paid. So that was a lot of like excitement for me, as a school kid, and then kind of like a kid in college. I felt invincible to a certain extent, that you could build stuff, you can, sell your services, or, many people were like building websites and building mobile applications, and I would just kind of build it for them. What I did not have back then was the experience of building a product, which is why I founded like my first company. And there we found out like there's a lot of enthusiasm for new creative use cases of mobile phones. We picked up this idea of building and sharing panoramic pictures. Now, of course, that's a default in all the phones, but back then you could just take a picture and try to share it with others. And we thought, okay, the world has to be seen more broadly, and we built like kind of this whole like uh, product for building and sharing panoramic pictures. And the goal was, okay, we want to build like a Google Street View type thing, where it's a crowdsourced community street view. Now, when I look back at it, I think we were like maybe 15 years ahead of its time on bringing VR and AR. I don't know whether VR and AR are still here, but at least at that time, it was non-existent. And
Why did
I
you
was
pick
just
that specific idea?
why that specific idea? So I think it came out of a project I had done for my college campus. I was in BITS Pilani's Goa campus, and a lot of people wanted to see the college before they came. So we took pictures of the college and we stitched them together and made a virtual street view, which was extremely popular. At some point, like I think about maybe like a million users on that product because they just wanted to see where they would be going and what is Bits. So that was a product called Bits 360 that I'd built, but that was just for one place. And then when we were looking through ideas, we thought this is something that, of course, a lot of people have interest in. So can we scale that?
Yeah, so I think my first interaction of your product was actually Bits 360.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, I've used Bits 360. So I am actually from Bits Core batch too. So I have used it maybe in 2008 or 9.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Wow.
yeah. So I remember like Bits 360, but I didn't know like who made it or who built it, but I definitely remember the 3D view of the campus and that you can do. So it makes sense like you wanted to like take that and productize it for others.
Yeah, wow. Well, we go way back then. So yeah, that was the genesis of it. I think we had a forum attached to it, so people could ask questions and get their answers. And at one point, I think there were more parents on that forum than kids, because parents in India are like always anxious about where their kid is going to go in. So I did a lot of like that stuff. I think kind of I learned that building a product is very different than building like a service for other people. And I think that's how I kind of caught the product bug, which eventually we productized, with like the app was called 360. We just got the bits out of it and we called it 360. It was eventually featured on the Google Play Store globally. I think we had like, I think about 10, 15 million users on it at some point.
Were you able to monetize it? What was the exit from that?
Yeah, no, monetization was horrible. It's like the churn rate for users is like very, very high on mobile. And you had to get, probably like 100 million users or a billion users. And there was this little thing called Instagram that had come out then, which we thought was worse. It did like only small pictures. It didn't do the full like, stuff that we were doing. But it just had a lot more traction then. So it didn't monetize very well. We were able to make a little business out of it down the road, but not substantial.
How were you making money out of it?
We gave upgrade packs, right? So if you wanted like an additional filter, you wanted more resolution, you wanted I think the model which actually even incorporated in Postman, or tried to in the beginning, to get to that Ramen profitability that you talked about in the intro. So it's like, no, you kind of hit a friction, you hit a button and you buy the product. So it was definitely fast sales. Like I think we were making decent amount of money, probably not like venture return money, but straightforward model.
Then at what point like that led to Postman? Like, did you guys realize that we should sell it or move on to the next idea? What was that transitioning point?
Yeah, I think eventually I realized that me and my co-founders, actually, this one co-founder had different visions of the product. Uh, to me, a natural extension of this was to go into the travel space, think about travelers, and do like other things that they could do. But I think his ideas are a bit different. So we parted ways. and it was mutual. And then I tried to figure out what to do next. So for 1 year, I kind of just hacked on stuff and kind of built Postman on the side as well.
What was the initial problem that you were trying to solve with Postman?
Yeah. So, as over time, I realized that through my life, while building applications, as well now building this application, uh, while coding itself is pretty solvable, like the coding loop is pretty solvable, the thorniest problems come from when things are being returned over the wire as an API call. Like that's where I kind of often would get stuck. So you're probably familiar with the Bits Pilani practice school system, right? So I did my practice school internship at Yahoo, and we were building like bigger systems there. And I was building the front end application. It would often break, and the problem would be like we did not really know what is behind the API that is making the application break. So that was kind of the genesis of, hey, this is a big problem. And then I encountered the same problem at my startup where we were building mobile apps. We were talking to external third party APIs. We were building our own APIs. And it was not just me, like my team was often kind of getting stuck. If you're building new things, the API is not ready. If you are consuming someone else's API, it breaks in different ways. So I needed a very simple tool to test it, which is how Postman came around. And I did not like anything that was out there. Like everything was very, I would not say poorly designed, but kind of designed without intent. There was no intent to design, rather. It was like, hey, we need this button, so let's just put the button here. We need this thing, so let's just kind of put that here. So when you're a new user to these things, you would often become very overwhelmed. And I have had a design instinct kind of ever since I started building stuff. So I wanted to build something that was simple, that is something I would use daily and would solve this problem for me.
Were you building Postman as while you're building something else as sort of like a support tool for yourself, or like Postman was something that you're actually building?
So it started out as the latter thing, and I was building it as a side project. I had a lot of fun kind of doing it. But over time, it became the main thing.
At what point did you realize that okay, this could be like its own company or its own product?
Yeah, I think the realization happened gradually because over time I realized that there was a lot of pull from developers into wanting more of this thing. And I don't think I ever intended to build a product or a company for developers, but I think I also had a sense that this is something that what people want. And, we,
Were there like signals that you're getting from like more people want this? Like what were the signals?
yeah. So more product usage, I put it up on the Chrome Web Store and kind of just took off. Then I got a ping from the Google Chrome team. They wanted to feature the product globally on the Chrome Web Store. So this was kind of my second, you know, mention, first with the Android Play Store and then Google Chrome Store. And yeah, the response was like phenomenal. Like, I mean, it was just people want more. So I was just like, hey, this is something really here. I didn't know where it will go. Like, what are the problems that actually exist? And of course, as maybe we might talk through, every year I found bigger things to do. So that was kind of like the motivation, like people were writing to me. They had like long lists of letters, they had like feedback. And while the product was in its very early stage, like Postman today is very different than where it started out to be. But I think there were certain core things that I think I got right in the beginning, and my co-founders who eventually joined me were also Postman users, so they were also using it like a lot. So I think we all had this intuitive sense that once we build something and once we improve it, it is kind of helping us for sure. But then when the response started coming in from the outside, that was the first clear signal that this could be a big company.
And talk a little bit about like that first monetization. I mean, developer products are notoriously hard to monetize, and most
Yeah,
of them are like open source. Once open source, like they have to convert into a closed source. They have to create enterprise offering before like any meaningful revenue can be made.
yeah,
Uh, how was that journey of like making it, ramen profitable?
yeah. So I had a lot of experience with that because I basically also had to do this thing because I ran out of money, you know, in life. I was like, we were in the first company. We were doing well, but not so well. I think, rent is expensive. Although, so I had to try a lot of models, right? So first, companies wanted to sponsor the project, and I was very clear that I don't want to do advertising within the product uh, for someone. So they would just sponsor the project, and we tried that. I tried then offering some kind of a premium sponsorship thing for customers that, hey, if you want me to keep going, you could sponsor this in the beginning. But eventually there was, as you said, there's no monetization. People like to use stuff and they didn't want to pay for it. Eventually, I think the first model that clicked was kind of more of an upgrade on the automation testing side, that people want to automate workflows. I priced it very low, which was a mistake. We corrected that kind of later. And then I think enough money started flowing that we kind of became ramen profitable, so to say, where people were just buying the pack, kind of like it was an upgrade pack, and then they started buying it in bulk. And that was the big kind of aha moment to recognize that actually this is not an individual product. It's actually a product that could solve a problem for teams and eventually for enterprises. So that was the dividing line that eventually developer products, even as much as they monetize with enthusiasm, it's the ROI that you have to quantify and sell to their bosses. And we started building product with that intent in mind, that there is the developer side that would always be free and open, and we have continuously built more free stuff over the years. um, and then it's when it comes to their managers and the enterprise buyer is when do you want to show value, and then we'd monetize the product.
At what point, sort of like you saw that, okay, this is not just like a small business, but this is a venture scale business, have to raise outside money? Or like, did you consciously avoid raising outside money, or talk a little bit about, because I think you haven't raised like big rounds as we see today, like a 6 year, 6 month old startup raising 10 million seed or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know how I would do it today, but I was very conscious of raising money. I think because Postman had like a steady source of revenue, plus we were hackers, we were all building stuff, and it was easy for us to see what we were building. So there was no catalyst for going out and raising money. We had a lot of inbound. In fact, all our rounds were inbound through our growth. And I think the way VCs found out about us was that their portfolio companies were all using Postman. So they started reaching out to me and they were curious about where we are going. And eventually I did want to start this as a formal company, but our seed round happened pretty quickly, which was rolled into a Series A. And at that point, I think the one
Who are
thing,
raising outside
yeah,
money? Was it a formal company, or is it just a project that you're running? And
yeah, it was just a project. Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
a project? How long was like just a project?
I think kind of a few months,
Okay.
like I think at kind of when I was doing it as a side project, that was a bit longer. But once I started on it full time, my co-founders joined also full time. That period was pretty short. Um, like it was maybe like 3-4 months. At which point, uh, things were happening quite fast and in parallel. Like we got our check and we were like, okay, now we got to, register a company, because you got to get a bank and put the money in somewhere.
So, talk a little bit about like the whole enterprise journey and selling to enterprises. Like, at what point you realize like, okay, now we have to like market and do go to market, because you had this nice thing which very few companies have, which is like the inbound traction. All right, like when you have inbound traction, at some point did it change? Like, okay, we have to do now outbound and like find actual customers, pitch them. Was it like, was it always like organic inbound?
Yeah. No, actually, the hard part started after raising money. And one of the things that we were already testing out, which did require outbound effort, which required customer validation, was we knew like app upgrade is not a sustainable business on its own. You software is never finished. You keep on doing things, and what we wanted to see was, can we solve a bigger problem with the product? And that problem was something we centered on in terms of how do teams work together? How do they work together on APIs or API related workflows? We had some signal from customers on wanting something like this, but they often were not able to articulate their real needs for which they would actually pay money for. So we ran a beta program. We tested out a bunch of hypotheses. We tested out the price points, and eventually we found out that okay, this is a real product for teams. So before we went to the enterprise product, we ran product validation cycles. We built the product, tweaked the product like hundreds of times, and then eventually we became a much more you know monthly per annual type business. But we kind of had that learning going in, and once we had that learning, my intent with our VC round was that we have to get to the US as quickly as possible to build a category leading company. From my prior experience, I was very sure that you cannot do that sitting in India because you need customers who are best in class, who are at the cutting edge of technology. You need their feedback. So while today's product might be good, tomorrow's product might fall behind. Um, and there were other companies out there. In fact, a lot of companies tried to acquire Postman back then. I had said no to all of them. So while they were ahead on venture funding, they were ahead on brand recognition. We were very intent that we have this solid base that deserves kind of more. And
Well,
and that's when I moved to the US.
like, what made you think that I shouldn't sell and continue? Like, what was the conviction? Like, is it more of like after building so many? I mean, you build multiple projects and seeing like the organic traction. Was that like was giving you the confidence? Like, why would you not sell?
I think we were once you know that you're solving like a hard problem, that nobody else is looking at it the same way that you can see it, you know you have something unique. If we knew somebody else was doing something similar, slightly different, then you kind of feel competitive pressure. And but we were kind of in a market of one, uh, where people again were telling us things that they just could not go anywhere else to build, and we were like, okay, we are seeing this in a different way. Most API products were actually only designed for the enterprise buyer. They were designed for the CIO. They were designed for the IT department, and developers were actually just dissatisfied with whatever tooling they had. So while there were companies like Apogee back then, there's MuleSoft. I mean, they're both part of like Google and Microsoft and Salesforce respectively, but developers were not using those things. So you could see that there is something here, provided we actually take upon the challenge and solve like hard problems. So both of these things were motivating. It was not like the job was done, because the job is done. Then you kind of like you might invite competition. So I knew this was a hard problem, and if the best engineers in the world are asking you about doing something, then you kind of just better do it, and you could do it on your own terms as a company.
So once you moved to US, how did things change? I think talk a little bit about like what are the challenges for an Indian founder who started in India, go to US and build it in US. Like, what are some of like the interesting challenges that you faced?
Yeah, well, first of all, like nobody knows who you are, right? I mean, technically it's true for anywhere you move to the Bay Area or something like that, but really nobody knows who you are. You do not have common university friends. You do not have common connections. Even people who move to the US do their masters. I didn't do a master's here, so didn't kind of have that network to lean on. We did have our investor who was very helpful in getting connections done. So I kind of started with like a basement co-working space here with a single desk. I, crashed on my friends' couches, and as long as the welcome was there. Um, but the core bit was to get a relationship with the customers started here. And we had our first VP of marketing, we had a DevRel person, we had a support person, and we did our first event. I think within a few weeks of me kind of coming here, and that was the starting of building out those relationships. So any customer who was willing to meet me, I would go meet them. I would do all the support calls myself along with my co-founders. But if support opened up an opportunity, then I would go meet those people too. So over time, I think I got enough conviction that okay, there's a lot of like uh, I would say value in meeting customers here, and then it eventually translated into hiring like salespeople and customer success people.
So you're currently, or like, is the team split between India and the US, or is it just US? So what does the team structure right now look like?
It's pretty global. We have more than 1,000 people, so it's US, Europe. I think we have people in more than 21 countries right now. We have 3 offices in the Bay Area, New York, Boston, Austin. Pretty global at this point. Like engineering is um, global as well. It used to be that India, at least starting out, was much more of an engineering presence, but we have all the types of people everywhere.
When you first moved and you started doing all this reach out to customers, over time, like which couple of things really helped build momentum for Postman, and both like in terms of marketing, or you can talk about as like a go to market, or just a couple of things that really helped like Postman to compound from that initial traction.
Yeah, I would say the hardest thing in the beginning was making sure that how the product is being iterated upon is staying in sync with what customers demand, and they're also in line with the vision that I think we want to build towards, which was kind of this enterprise scale API platform. Um, so the things that helped us compound was just solving those problems. When you are in different places, communication challenges, cultural challenges, all these things were uh, big challenges. You just like you moved here and then your team is 20 12 hours away, and they don't understand anything that you're saying. So how do we actually build trust and those systems to kind of continue iterating fast? And I was very sure that if iteration velocity goes down, then we're not going to succeed. So I think what really helped us go fast was just this maniacal focus that this is a problem to be solved. It has to be solved urgently, and we have uh, hundreds of thousands and then soon millions of users to satisfy. So that was kind of like this relentless focus is one thing I would say, and then making sure operationally we are well set up, making sure go to market is evolving as we are evolving. So we started with a head of customer success. We built support that enterprise customers would eventually need, and then eventually we hired sales to scale kind of more on the outbound side. So all these things kind of uh, while they were happening, product iteration and product velocity also has to be like very fast is what I think helped us.
Well, are developers as customers more harder to serve, or like how are they different from a regular customer?
I don't think anyone in their right mind decides to serve developers. When developers choose you, you decide to serve them. And actually, it has stayed true pretty much to this extent. You cannot tell developers what to buy, what to use. Uh, it's very hard as a segment because some part of our development organization in enterprise customers is also your competition. They're trying to solve. If you're solving a legitimate problem, you actually always find competition. So I would find often like people who maybe even look like me or were like in similar positions at other companies would also build something like Postman. you know so you are also asking them to kind of get rid of their baby a little bit, which is always hard. Pricing is hard, so you have to build competitive advantages on problems that they are not going to solve for. So developers often, while they're excited about productivity gains that they can get from tools, they don't care about quality, reliability, security as much in their side projects as their main job. And I think those are things to differentiate on. Uh, and eventually, you have to earn their trust so that they want to use the product. But then you have to show ROI to their managers, and that's how you kind of get a platform.
So once I think last couple of years, building APIs or like consuming APIs has become very easy in some sense. Like a lot more non-developers are consuming APIs via vibe coding or if you want to call them agents, um, be it for like with tools like Replit or VS Code itself, like is now slightly more agentic, so non-developers can do things that they were otherwise not doing. And obviously, developers will do what they were doing a little bit more. How did that change the consumption patterns of Postman?
Yeah. So the interesting thing for us is that we've always known that since 2000, 15, whenever we started, like actually non-developers have been using APIs for a very long time, and you would often qualify developers between like what we would call like an inner loop, which is developers writing code and using APIs, and an outer loop, which is you have all of your functions, either SREs, DevOps, support functions, integrators, and then you kind of actually you go broader. You have business users who want to get data, or want to do something with it. So actually, the thesis in the company of building a platform was that they're going to be just net new builders in the world, uh, and that also, by the way, was also one of the reasons why we win among our customers, because developers would also often design products just for developers. They would not build it for non-developers. So all of this has been like net positive for Postman. The more developers, the more new types of developers are there, the more APIs they consume, which means more demand for APIs, which means more Postman usage as well as more Postman customers. Um, with the rise of agents, I think what's been interesting is that actually, in over the last, I'd say 18 months, we actually treat agents as a new class of API consumers. They are as important, if not important, than human developers for Postman. So we've been building products for them. So how do agents consume APIs? What are the guardrails they need to have? How do they do discovery? How do they understand APIs are much more relevant, and we believe significantly expands our TAM. Uh, but a lot of the existing principles like apply. So we're seeing a mix of all of this, like developers who are building applications before, new types of developers that you mentioned who are empowered by coding agents and others, and then we have agents themselves who are big consumers of APIs.
Do you see like the use cases for which Postman is being used has increased or decreased, um, net? Like, and is it because people are creating more APIs or people are consuming more? Like, what is your thesis there?
I mean, it's increasing for both of those reasons. Every technology wave or a platform shift results in more APIs. And like the way mobile and cloud were catalysts for before, in fact, it's happened like every 10-15 years. When the internet came around, we were building desktop apps, and now you have web apps, right? Then the mobile and the cloud era started, and actually both of them, mobile apps led to more APIs, because now instead of building like one application, you had the client server architecture. Now you're building more APIs for your mobile phone, and now for multiple platforms. And on the cloud side, you had more microservices and serverless architectures improve. So as I studied like the last like 70, 80 years of computing, every time there is a new platform change, there are new APIs. And the same thing is happening with agents. You have MCPs, you have CLIs, you have AI APIs, and they all have like interesting consumption patterns. And the applications that developers are creating today are different than the applications they were creating before. You're actually building probabilistic applications, these agents, and you need to test them a bit differently. But all of those agents also need all the existing infrastructure that we have built. So we are seeing many interesting patterns. They're evolving, like of course every month, but APIs are the bedrock for all of these things.
One of the reasons I asked this question is if tools like VS Code, embed things which are now like capable of like calling an API, taking the result, interpreting the result, does that like reduce the reason why either agents or developers go to Postman?
Um, Not really. I think that has always been like a narrow use case, and Postman's platform is much broader than that. In fact, we provide VS Code extensions, we provide terminal tools, We also have an MCP server that you can connect to VS Code. Eventually, you have to get API documentation, you have to get context, you have to test verifiability, not just for that one call, but for like the millions of calls that are out there. So the way we are looking at agentic development is when you kind of look at either prompt based development or you look at purely automated development, what are the places you would want to integrate Postman into your workflow? So the same pattern kind of applies. Now, even if you're calling APIs less, you now have to do more context management. You have to do more discovery on the other side. And Postman is a full platform today, right? So we do everything from design, development, testing, monitoring, cataloging, developer portals, SDKs, you name it. We have everything from development tools to production runtime tools. So the benefit of the platform is kind of doesn't matter where you start. Eventually, customers adopt the full breadth of the platform.
You're one of the few founders like who scaled like an Indian-based company, moved to the US and scaled it globally. What are the pros and cons of like building in India versus building in the US?
Yeah, I would say that India has fantastic talent. Like we have some of the best engineers in India, and they contribute, as well as kind of any engineer that we have globally. Um, so I don't think there's a dearth of talent in India. Our office in Bangalore has grown. We actually, got a new office last year. We're getting another office this year, so it's kind of grown. I think the thing that often engineers or companies can miss is that you want to be much more thinking from the vantage point of the customer versus just trying to finish your backlog. And I think once engineers traverse that uh, typical gap, because there are not a lot of examples out there on how to do that, I think they see that gain in productivity. So oftentimes, companies can resort to much more of a hierarchical management structure in India. They think more headcount equals more value creation. So those are some of the cons that I would say. But in terms of advantages, I think engineers are extremely talented. When we have engineering cycles, you just get 24-hour cycles. Work is always going on. You can hand over work from here if you build a tight knit team together that can finish off by the time you kind of wake up, and the same thing kind of continues on. So there are many, many advantages here, provided that companies are conscious about culture. And I think the hardest part is keeping people in sync. Even like a 12-hour difference is enough to make people kind of get out of sync. So we've tried very, very hard, and having great leaders, having managers has been very helpful, who understand this particular problem.
Who are like the companies or like founders in either in Postman kind of developer space or in general, like we really admire?
Yeah, boy, I think that answer has changed over time. you know I think I always looked at the more um, uh, when I looked at companies to learn from, it was like if I could marry the design genius of Steve Jobs with the operational rigor and the smarts of Jeff Bezos into the company, like these were the two people I would like to read about or learn from. um, in the more recent crop, let me think of uh, yeah, I wish I had a better answer.
Does Postman have like Bezos kind of principles?
Some of them, I think Amazon has many principles, but we have create with curiosity, earn trust, um, and many other such principles to help us guide it. I think a lot of things have evolved as well as the company has scaled. We have adopted a much more AI native mindset. Like company runs very, very differently. So I think
Mm,
over time we have become much more,
mm,
I'd say we have become more engineering centric
mm.
than even we were before. So I would say the principles have been kind of static, but I think their practice has changed more dramatically over the last few months.
How did like usage of AI change how like did that change how Postman operates, or like are you seeing how people within different orgs operate because of AI? Like what is the impact of AI been?
Yeah, I think if AI is used consciously, and I believe we're probably one of the few companies who are probably doing it that way, considering you hear about token maxing and all of the wasted spend on AI these days. The way I started thinking about it was that the company has to change dramatically from the top down. You cannot give AI tools to people and just expect magical results. So I had to change kind of my way of looking at the company first. And to do that, we kind of built, we kind of became AI maximalists in a certain sense. Where, like, if the problem can be solved by AI, we're going to actually go with that first, which means feeding it all the context, making it understand our business process, making it understand our workflows, and then having it suggest um, ideas and options. And that was kind of on the business side. On the development side, of course, we empowered like our engineers to go and experiment and try out coding agents that they would like to use. So a combination of that has resulted in like a flatter org. Um, Everyone is either a builder or a seller for the most part. People are building stuff right there. We are not really debating over documents or future course of action like a prototype. Shipping is better than a prototype. A prototype is better than discussion. Um, and we have high agency individuals who practice good taste and judgment to kind of cut through the noise. I think AI can cut both ways. You can create a lot of slop, you can create a lot of noise and just get drowned out. So empowering kind of people with high agency. um, we I personally review like a lot of things. We have agents checking what's kind of going on. They are reviewers, and we can we are managing uh, probably an order of magnitude more work with the same headcount that we've had since last year.
What are your general thoughts on like token maxing?
Yeah, I think it's just like enthusiasm for the technology without like an end goal. I think companies got ahead of themselves. They thought like, intelligence is going to kind of go help their business automatically. And I think there is this principle, right? Like when an input becomes a, kind of, what is that thing, right? It's just like the wrong measure to look at. Like you want to look at the outcome, and you start looking at the input, and people figure out that okay, if that's how I'm going to get promoted, if that's how my value is going to be measured, I'm just going to spend more on tokens. Very easy to spend more on tokens.
Yeah,
Like you just have two agents talk to each other, and you just have a lot of tokens.
if the metric becomes the goal, then everyone is optimizing the metric and
That's fun.
not really
Yes.
the outcome of it.
Yeah.
Uh, is your like AI spend like I've heard some stories where like companies suddenly went 10x their AI spend and had to rapidly come back. Like, are you seeing that happening within your company? Um,
Yeah, we manage, all of our AI agents in Astro, which is like our agentic operating system. So we built it with those outcomes in mind. We started building it kind of last year. And on the business side, we manage all our agents through it. So what Astro lets us do is basically we can build agents on any API or any framework, but it runs in the control plane for Astro. And we can see who's using what exactly are the workflows you're executing. So we have humans and agents essentially living together, and we can control kind of spend there. On the coding side, we've been more flexible, but we're definitely measuring ROI right now. And there's definite improvement in productivity, but it's not correlated with costs for sure. Like that correlation is harder. Like I think some of our best engineers do use a lot of AI, but they don't spend that much. And sometimes we have uh, early stage engineers who end up spending a lot, but are not kind of getting much done. So I would say we allow developers to choose, but we also look at those costs. I would not say we are at that point where we just suddenly like lost control, but I think the way I do see companies spending on AI they would definitely be a lot in that boat.
Can you talk a little bit more about Astro? Like, how does an agent within Astro look like? It feels like every company needs a version of this. So.
We believe so, and that's why we kind of built it. So we were building like an agentic framework before, but we thought like, okay, that's going to be a solved problem with coding agents. That's not the hard part. Uh, but like with Astro, we actually treat an agent almost as a real employee. So it has an identity. You control which APIs it can call. You control like which LLMs it's kind of talking to. It has a control plane as well as like a runtime plane. So you can start with any framework. You can use Crew, Vercel, or any of the other ones, and then you just subscribe to the Astro spec. Once you subscribe to the Astro spec, then the agent is visible in Astro. And then you spin it up, you launch it. You can launch multiple instances of it, and then it manifests itself as a UI. So many agents that we have their own UI. They can sometimes build their own UI too, but they're also available in Slack. They're available as a mobile phone app. So, so kind of Astro functions as that layer, but then you can have them have their identity in any system where users interact with.
Is that what led to building the agent identity passport, or uh,
Yeah. That's one of the big problems that is there in the industry today is that agents almost always have unfettered access to APIs through API keys. And when developers are building these agents, they need data and API access for which they obtain these API keys. But these API keys are actually coexisting with, first of all, your coding agents who are living next to it, as well as when these agents are calling APIs, what permissions they have, how much can they call is a huge problem today. And almost every hack that you see out there reported in the wild has to do something with API keys and API access. So what we looked at it was from first principles, like what does agentic identity mean? And from Postman's viewpoint, an agentic identity is very tightly tied to what the agent can do, right? So otherwise, an agent is an agent if only it can do things. Otherwise, it's an LM. So we kind of built Passport as a control layer for both humans and agents. So you can have an agent have an identity in Passport, and then it never actually gets a real API key. It gets access that is provisioned by your uh, team about how what it can access, when it can access, how much it can access, and we could see the problem very clearly when we built like these Astro agents.
interesting? So it looks like maybe you should productize Astro itself.
Astro, yeah, is a product. Yeah, it's there, and we're gonna have we have early access on with a few customers, and the response has been very positive. We're gonna have a G announcement soon.
Amazing. Uh, we're almost at the end of the conversation. Um, I want to ask, where do you see Postman going in, let's say, 3 years or 5 years from now?
Yeah, so we believe, just like for the first decade of Postman, it was the API platform and a system of record for enterprises to manage APIs. And Postman's building the agent native AI stack for agents for this decade. Agents are going to be, consuming APIs as well as building APIs 1,000 times more than what developers did. And Postman of this decade is going to probably look very different than what we had the last decade, but built on the same foundations. We have 10 years of learnings of how complex infrastructure works, what are the challenges that people encounter when they're building APIs, and they're just going to be amplified, much more with agents. So, it's not just Passport and Astro. We have our Fabric Gateway that we announced. We have Fern that we acquired, and Postman, Passport, Fern, Astro, and maybe a few other things that are built with purely agents as first class consumers is what Postman is becoming.
Do you have plans to go to IPO?
I would not share that right now. I would say we always want to build a long term company that is customer obsessed, but maybe in due time we'll have more to share.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show, Abhinav. I've always been excited about Postman, the story, and hopefully, like, it goes to more interesting places and maybe an IPO.
So thanks so much.